The enemy's moving again. It's not difficult to spot them. They plod along in the heavy snow with light brown uniforms, standing out like hay bale practice targets against the pristine white snow. Despite this being the height of winter, nobody bothered to issue the Russian occupiers winter uniforms. Simo Haya isn't one to complain though. If anything, he's grateful. Certainly, it makes his job easier. He doesn't use a modern telescopic sight the way many of his fellow scouts do. Sure, the fancy glass is nice for really long-range shots, but it also glints in the sunlight. He's seen too many of his friends get their heads blown off after a stray glint gave them away. Many of the enemy too. Only this time it was him delivering the death. Besides, using telescopic sights means you have to raise your head just a few extra inches than you do with iron sights. And that's all it takes to get the top of your head blown off. If it wasn't bad enough, the cold weather often fogs up the glass, basically rendering a shooter useless. Instead, he uses good old-fashioned iron sights on his antiquated Seiko M2830. It's been in service since 1891, but most of the troops prefer newer models with fancier sights. For Simo, though, it's all he needs to do his deadly work, and he does it with deadly accuracy. Now he watches the squad of Soviet soldiers trudging through the snow, slowly working their way toward his position. He couldn't ask for better targets. The men stand out like sore thumbs in their brown coats, and their lack of snowshoes slows them down to practically a crawl. They can thank Stalin for that, he thinks, as he scans the small formation and starts mentally assigning an order to each kill. It was Stalin's paranoid purges of the Red Army that saw it left with a bunch of idiots running everything. That's the only way to explain the terrible performance of the Russian military to date, invading a country a fraction of their size and barely able to move more than a few miles in weeks of fighting. The fools even drive tanks over frozen lakes without surveying them first, only to collapse into the ice and drown their crews. Stalin's purge of any Soviet leadership he thought presented a threat to his rule has not just cost the Red Army its best generals and tacticians, but its mostly capable logistics personnel too. What kind of an idiot would send an entire army to fight in Finland in the middle of winter without snowshoes or white coats to help camouflage the soldiers? Simo clears his head. He's done assigning his kill order. Whoever that idiot is, he's grateful. Slow, steady pressure on the trigger and the old rifle barks out a sharp retort. Less than half a second later, a Russian soldier falls backward into the snow. Perfect shot. Right below the throat. The Russians panic and begin to scatter. Some begin to return fire, shooting blindly into the snow-covered landscape in front of them. Simo curses under his breath as he moves his sights to his next target. He'd miscalculated the soldier's movement. He meant to fire once the man had firm footing on his next step. That would have prevented him from flying straight backwards and thus giving away the direction of the fire. Instead, he caught him just a breath too late, with the rear foot already in motion and the soldier off balance when the bullet struck, leaving him with only one way for the massive kinetic energy of the impact to send him. A dead giveaway for a squad of professional soldiers, but these aren't professionals. They're conscripts, hastily drawn up from farms and villages across the Soviet Union, given ill-fitting uniforms that often leave them suffering from frostbite or just dead from the extreme cold, and thrown into a disorganized, inept offensive in the dead of winter. His next shot catches one of the men firing blindly straight in the head. He had meant to kill him fourth, but the fool was getting lucky, and rounds were starting to fall near Simo's position. He has little fear of actually being seen. He spent hours in the dead of night building his killing cave, a hard-packed hole in the snow that completely encompasses him. The hard-packed snow helps muffle the rifle and steady it. He allows the falling snow to accumulate over and around him and helps hide the signs of the hardpack he surrounds himself with. But he constantly brushes away the falling snow from directly in front of him. That way the rifle doesn't cause the telltale puff of snow with each shot. Bam! The next shot catches the man he meant to kill second in the upper chest again. It's a clean kill, just like he was taught as a kid hunting deer, wolves, and other wild game. They might be invaders and occupiers, but Simo has no wish to prolong their suffering like they truly deserve. Vengeance is another man's game. Simo's here simply doing a job and nothing more. Only a few seconds have passed since the ambush began, and the panicking soldiers have finally settled into three predictable roles. Some have thrown themselves to the ground, seeking cover in the snow. Not a bad idea, really, except the snow does little to stop or even slow Simo's bullets. Numbers 4 and 5 meet their death despite burying themselves half a foot into the snow. Others are running blindly, still unsure of which direction the firing is coming from. To their credit, some are trying to do as they've been trained, assault the ambush, but sadly they have no idea which direction the ambush is coming from. Others are simply running for what looks like solid cover. A boulder here, the remains of a fence post there. He ignores those for now. The third group is fleeing for their lives, and in a panic, the Russians break and start to rush back in the direction of friendly lines. You can't fight what you can't see, and demoralized already from the grinding war, poor equipment, and worse, food, and abusive leadership, the threat of an invisible attacker is too much for them to bear, so they run. But Simo doesn't let them. More than the men seeking cover and scanning the hills for him, these runners are now his greatest threat. If one of them gets back to friendly lines and has the presence of mind to report his position, it could be a very bad day for Simo as artillery rains down around him. It won't be the first time that he's had to dig himself through an artillery barrage meant specifically for him. Normally, his priority target would be the radio operator, except like most Russian units, these men aren't carrying one. It's not just squads either. He's seen entire platoons of Russian infantry operating via a system of runners. No wonder they're having such a hard time against the more mobile, flexible Finnish defenders. By the time they pin a target down and get word back to command, the Finns are already attacking from a completely different direction. It's like a bad game of whack-a-mole, playing blindfolded, and sometimes information so late by the time the artillery support comes in, it's falling right on Russian heads. And that's why it's important to get the runners first, even if it interrupts the kill order. 3 more rapid shots and there are now no more runners. Problem solved. Simo scans the survivors, clearly visible due to their brown uniforms against the white snow. He almost feels sorry for them, but he can cope with the guilt later. Now he needs to finish the job. He scans once more for any signs of a squad leader, really anyone who seems to be taking charge. Unsurprisingly, he finds nobody. The Russians have never been good about fielding a professional non-commissioned officer corps. Explains why they're so awful at maneuvering. Satisfied that nobody's coordinating the panic-stricken survivors, Simo takes a moment to refill his mouth with fresh snow. He moves slowly, steadily, and very methodically. Otherwise, he might give away his position. The occasional rifle round falls near his position from the panicked soldiers below, but he's not concerned. It'll take all the luck in the world for the amateurs below to spot his little den. The fresh mouthful of snow is vital. It cools his breath before he exhales, so it doesn't give him away with the telltale stream of steam. Ready to continue his grim work, he brings the iron sights back to his eye again. He adjusts for the rising wind and squeezes the trigger, another Russian mother who will never see her son again. He shouldn't have let a dictator send him here. Simo works slowly, methodically. Even taking shots too close together threatened to give his position away, allowing soldiers to pinpoint his location by the sound of the firing. Instead, he takes a shot, then simply waits, mentally counting up to 30 seconds. Then he repeats, over and over again until finally, only one survivor remains. This one is well protected. He hid behind a rock as the ambush began, and Simo's having a hard time getting a good beat on him. At least the Russians figured out which direction the firing's coming from, and keeps the large boulder between himself and Simo. It's now turned into a standoff with only 2 outcomes. The first is the soldier gets lucky and another Russian squad or even armored vehicle happens by and he flags them down. That could be problematic for Simo. He's certainly not equipped to deal with an armored vehicle, and taking on an additional squad would be an issue. Even if he doesn't run out of ammo first, sheer numbers will likely overwhelm him. The second is that the soldier chooses to be patient and simply waits. The sun is still high in the sky, but days are short in the Finnish winter. A few more hours and darkness will cover the soldier's escape. There is a third option. Simo supposes he could just let the man go. There's already 11 fresh corpses in the snow, slowly turning the bright white into a deep crimson. What's the 12th? Is killing just one more invader really going to end the war? These are the internal struggles Simo details in his private memoirs, hidden from the world until years after his death. He calls it his Book of Sins, a personal and detailed account of the 500-plus soldiers that after the war he'll estimate ended up dead because of him and his rifle. He doesn't bother justifying. He's already killed so many people it's pointless, really. Instead, he decides and then acts. His first shot strikes the boulder near the top. Predictably, the impact of the bullet causes the boulder to crack and send fine slivers of razor-sharp granite exploding outwards. The soldier catches a few to the face and rears back instinctively. That's all Simo needs. The second shot ends the Russian's life. But it's not a clean kill. It couldn't be. He had only 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches of exposed skull to work with. Instead of an immediate kill by penetrating deep into the brain, the bullet struck the upper layers of the brain and shore them away as it exited out of the upper back of the skull. This sends the soldier flying on his back and immediately begins to convulse as the brain tries to cope with the massive damage it just suffered. Simo curses and forgets to regulate his breathing, letting out a brief wisp of steam. This isn't right. Kills should be clean, whether they're on prey animals or on invaders. He tries to readjust for a killing shot, but the boulder's still between him and the slowly dying man. The only parts of him visible to Simo are an arm and a leg, both convulsing as the brain struggles to process electrical signals to the muscles, neither of which allow Simo to achieve his mercy kill. There's nothing he can do for him. A full minute and a half later, the Russian is finally still. Simo curses again and apologizes to the dead soldier, or maybe it's to God. Later, he'll have time for regret and repentance, but now he has to remain calm and alert. The entire exchange seems to have gone on for days, but it's barely lasted longer than 15 minutes. Most of the killing was in the first few minutes. Then the rest was just a lot of waiting and mopping up. Now is not the time to drop his guard, though. He might not be able to see any more Soviet soldiers before him, but that doesn't mean there aren't any. It's been at least 2 weeks since the domestic newspapers started running stories about him. The Finnish newspapers call him the White Death. The Russian newspapers don't report on him at all, especially not on the staggering number of casualties he'd helped inflict on the occupiers. Later in life, rumors will circulate that it was the Russians who gave him the nickname the White Death, but in reality it was always the Finnish propaganda construction. To add to his mystique, the papers add additional titles such as the Magic Shooter, implying that his bullets can pierce even tank armor to achieve their one-shot, one-kill lethality. The Russian newspapers might not be running stories about him and his soaring kill counts, but that doesn't mean they aren't extremely aware of him and his actions. In fact, intelligence intercepts have confirmed that the Russians have dispatched their own snipers looking to eliminate him. It's these he's now carefully scanning the countryside for. When the war first began, he would have never dreamt that the Russians would use an entire squad of young conscripts as bait just to kill one enemy sniper. But after months of fighting, he's witnessed Soviet tactics for himself. Often they send hundreds of conscripts to their deaths against Finnish machine guns and artillery just so their more veteran troops can have an easier go at it in the follow-up attack. The Russians are fighting a war of attrition in the purest form. Their men eating up Finnish bullets until all magazines and cartridges are exhausted. This is largely because they're simply too tactically incompetent to do much else. If Stalin is popular at home, he's more popular than ever with the Finnish military. Unfortunately, though, Finland is a fraction the size of the Soviet Union and the tactic is working. Today, Simo is concerned that the ambush was entirely too easy. These men were sacrificial lambs. The day is silent, except for the distant sounds of tanks rumbling along somewhere miles away. Simo remains perfectly still. Snipers can't remain in one position for long or they'll become easy prey to artillery or counter snipers, so most snipers will make their escape or reposition immediately after eliminating targets. Simo, however, stays absolutely still, maintaining the same careful discipline that's kept him alive for weeks on the front, even as he's penetrated deep behind enemy lines to go hunting. His position is good. He's situated on the downslope of a large hill where he spent several hours last night digging himself into the snow. He's avoided the tree line and the cover it provides only because he was establishing his position in the dead of night. The snow had begun to fall again. Once Simo was dug in sufficiently, the fresh layer of snow would erase all signs of digging. The downslope position has two advantages. First, it makes the few parts of him that are visible more difficult to see thanks to the sun casting a shadow over his part of the hill. Second, as the falling snow creates new snowdrifts, they fall down on the slope and over his position, helping camouflage him further. But he picked this specific hill for a third reason. The winter sun sets quickly this time of year, and as it does, it will fall mostly behind him. That means anyone hunting for him will be forced to do so with the sun in their eyes. All Simo has to do is wait patiently and maintain his incredible discipline. His body aches to move and stretch after 6 hours of laying perfectly still, but he shoves those thoughts out of his mind as he continues to carefully scan the surrounding countryside for a threat he instinctively feels is there. Something, a sixth sense, has him on edge. When the growing hunger becomes difficult to ignore, he doesn't deny himself the way other snipers might. Denying yourself food often leads to becoming shaky, throwing your accuracy off. Instead, he carries small pieces of bread and sugar cubes in his pockets. He moves slowly, deliberately, almost imperceptibly to remove the sugar cube and put it in his mouth. The effort takes him half an hour to complete. So slow and minuscule are his movements. The sugar cube is dissolved in a fraction of that time, but the boost of energy is enough to keep the shakes away. Crows have begun to work at the bodies down below. He doesn't dare check his watch, but instead gauges how much time has passed by the lengthening of shadows. 3, maybe 4 hours since the ambush, and still nothing. But he can't shake the feeling of being hunted. Something is telling him death is out there, waiting for him to make one mistake. Maybe it's a sixth sense, or maybe it's just his knowledge that in his position, that's exactly what he would do. The lives of 12 men in exchange for the life of one? With Simo's count approaching 200, it's difficult for him to deny it's a fair exchange. He stayed alive by always planning for all possible contingencies, though, including this one. The ambush location wasn't chosen at random, and as the sun starts to set in the sky, the reason why becomes clear. With the sun now behind him, it's firmly in the eyes of any would-be hunter, and more importantly, there. The hunt is over in less than a second. That's the benefit of not using a scope. It narrows your field of view too much. It's nice for picking out details, but too many snipers spend their short lives staring down the lens of their scope and missing out on the bigger picture. Not Simo. Using only his old rifle's iron sights, he immediately spots the telltale glint of an enemy's scope in movement, searching and scanning for him. A few pounds of trigger pressure later, and the duel is complete. He must have killed the Russian immediately because he hears no scream. The only thing that gives the well-hidden enemy sniper away now is the rapidly growing patch of crimson in the fresh white snow. But Simo still doesn't move. His only celebration is a fresh mouthful of snow in order to continue cooling his breath and prevent his position being given away by steam. It's discipline more than accuracy that keeps a sniper alive. He eliminated one hunter, but there could be others. Minutes turn to an hour. Simo doesn't move. With the sun only 20 minutes from fully setting, it happens. He hears the telltale sign of roaring, distant artillery. The sound is quickly followed by the screaming, high-pitched whine of incoming rounds that smash into a grove of trees to his right. So there was another sniper. Only with the sun starting to set, he knew his hunt was running out of time. Having failed to locate Simo, the Russian finally caved and simply called for an artillery strike in the general area, hoping to kill him before the cover of night allowed him to slip away once more. The artillery rocks the hill and surrounding trees. Much of it's falling onto the grove of trees to his right, and after that's been turned into matchsticks, rounds start falling to the trees on his left. The fire's being guided by the enemy sniper, who's eliminating all the most probable hiding spots. He'd never dreamed Simo was hiding in plain view the entire time. Yet another reason a good sniper never picks the obvious spots. That doesn't mean that he's safe, though, as artillery is notoriously inaccurate. A round proves this point by smashing into the snow a few hundred feet below Simo, throwing up massive plumes of snow. He can hear the angry buzzing of razor-sharp shrapnel spraying into the snow around him. He stays cool, though, all the time scanning for the enemy sniper. Panicking now would be a death sentence, as the moment he gets up to run for it, even under the cover of incoming rounds, he has no doubt that the Russian will take his shot. This isn't the first time the Russians have tried artillery in frustration, and it won't be the last. The barrage continues 15 minutes after the skies turn dark. Rounds come uncomfortably close, but the falling snow plumes only help to add to Simo's camouflage. The enemy has used artillery to sweep across the landscape in broad strokes, leaving little standing in its wake. Even the bodies below have been ravaged by incoming rounds or torn to shreds by high-speed shrapnel. Yet Simo remains, and when it becomes clear that more rounds aren't incoming, he makes his move. There's still a low fog of snow in the air from all the thick plumes kicked up by the incoming artillery, and this, along with the cover of darkness, give him all the cover he needs to make his escape. Simo avoids the actual crest of the hill, where he'll be highlighted against the stars and dancing lights of the far northern sky. Instead, he moves along the military crest, parallel to the battlefield below him, heading into cover of the twisted and splintered trees. Once there, he follows the curve of the hill to a narrow valley where he'll be covered from observation on all sides. He picked his escape route as carefully as his firing position, not leaving a single detail to chance. In minutes, he left his old position and a frustrated enemy sniper behind, and within an hour, he'll be back behind friendly lines. He takes pains to announce his approach to friendly lines through a predetermined position that's been told to expect him and several other scout snipers dispatched the evening before. Entering the camp, his commanding officer gives him a cursory nod. The man looks exhausted, spent after another day of repelling another fierce Russian assault. The Russians have the numbers, but the Finns have the superior defensive positions and fighting spirit. They're proving a very difficult nut to crack. "It's good you did not die, Simo," his superior remarks weirdly as he points him in the direction of a hot meal, a rare luxury on the front. "Was it a good hunt?" Simo simply nods, gives a quick figure of total enemy KIA. Not all kills can be verified independently, but Simo is a humble man, even in the midst of war. There's little reason to doubt his grim figures, especially because, unlike others, he takes no pleasure in any of them. It's simply his duty, carried out without hatred or malice against the men who invaded his country, and the moment they pack up and leave, he'll stop killing them. Until then, though, he continues his hunt, killing as many of them as possible before he himself is killed in return. Simo has no idea that in less than 4 months, he'll earn the title of history's deadliest sniper, with the highest body count in history, 259 confirmed kills and over 500 unconfirmed. Then again, he is operating in a target-rich environment against an enemy who lacks discipline, motivation, or even proper winter equipment. Simo's body count, or his tally of sins as he'll view it later in life, is more a testament to the evil of dictators than to his own competency. But that's not to say that Simo Haya is truly one of history's deadly snipers, and there are 13 fresh Russian corpses to prove the fact. For now, he tucks into his hot meal and mentally reviews the actions of the day, seeking for ways he could have improved his efficiency further, probing his actions for any tactical weaknesses he can eliminate in the future. His mind is always working, always preparing for the next day's actions, even as it also longs for peace. Now go check out what actually makes a sniper bullet different, or click this other video instead.